Hi, this is Linda and Judy, two real New York City moms who have lived here both over 30 years. We have raised our kids here, we have worked here, we have lived here, we try to get apartments here, and we're here to give you the real dope about what it's like to live and work in New York City. So the first thing we want to talk about is the challenge of getting an apartment, which is very, very difficult. One of the big issues is A, finding an apartment, and then second, finding one that you can afford. So behind me is my first New York City apartment, and it was a big deal because it was a rent stabilized apartment. In New York, they have a thing called rent control and rent stabilization, which means your rent cannot be jacked up suddenly. So it's a great thing to keep affordable housing in New York, though we need more. But this apartment behind me, which I'll show you in a minute, was a small studio. I had great closet space, and I was paying a whopping $742. I was so grateful to have got this apartment. And I lived here for 13 years. I lived here for 3 of them with my daughter before we won a housing lottery and I moved out. But it's a great little studio. It was in the back. The church was behind me. It was quite quiet. I had a nice little balcony and a full bathroom, and I'll show you the building in a minute. But Linda, what do you want to tell them?
Well, we're going to go to my apartment that I got, but I think that one of the things we would like to remind people is we moved here before there was the internets. There were all of these apps. I mean, it was definitely not the way it is today. I know it's more expensive, but at least you have more resources. I remember going and looking in the New York Times on the weekends, the Village Voice, lining up at all those open houses to find an apartment. But we're going to get to my apartment. So Judy, I do have a question.
Yeah.
How did you find your apartment?
Oh, that's a good question. So the way I found my apartment is I saw a little ad in the New York Times on a Sunday morning. And at that time I was dating someone who lived about 10 blocks from here. And I remember saying to him, do you think this ad is legit? Because it seemed too good to be true. And I ran over here as fast as I could on a Sunday morning. There was about 5 people in the apartment looking at it. And I don't even think I was in the apartment 5 whole minutes. I just said, I'll take it. And then what was even more interesting is that they had a formula to figure out if you could afford the rent.
Yeah.
So they would take the rent and multiply it by 40, and that had to be your annual salary. And I remember when they did that, I came like a few dollars under the wire. They were like shocked that I could afford it, and I too. And I mean, then kept running the numbers again and again. But another thing people used to do back in the day to get their apartment is there was a newspaper called the Village Voice.
Yes.
And that would have like all the listings for roommates and apartments. Again, this is pre-internet. And smart New Yorkers knew that the Village Voice came out at a place in Astor Place on Tuesday night before it went anywhere.
A newsstand, people.
A
Remember
newsstand,
those? Woo!
an actual physical paper. And we used to go there on Tuesday night and look through the ads and try to get a jump start on
Crazy.
housing.
So here's a question I have for you. So this happened to me in a couple of apartments. I wasn't making a lot of money.
Yeah.
Sorry. Did you ever have to have a co-signer?
Yes, I had to have a co-signer. I remember I borrowed the money for the down payment from a friend. I thought it was so much money at that time. I was so nervous about moving in here. But God, I used this apartment. I had parties in there. I rented it out. I raised my kid in there. I mean,
in a studio, people.
In a studio, in a little studio, probably about 200 feet.
So I will say, so both of my parents, when I was looking for an apartment, had passed away. So I had to ask my poor aunt in Brooklyn to co-sign for an apartment, which she happily did. But I think this comes as a shock to people. If you have a job, why do you need your parents to co-sign for an apartment? It's because they ask for so much money that they want to make sure that you can afford the apartment. So that's Judy's story.